Yawol, I will be presenting my presentation on my paper entitled Marshallese Feminism, a story of female centrality in cultural configuration. My name is Desmond Narain Doulatram, and I am from the Liberal Arts Department from the College of the Marshall Islands and Manager of Marshall Islands. Marshallese feminism is a product of negotiation and renegotiation stemming from political and cultural priorities. Modeled after traditional archetypes, there are two types of feminism apparent within Marshallese society, described in the oral traditions, or what we call bebanado. One stems from the feminine leadership examples of the goddesses Luadon Mor, Chinerilo Kobo, Lidibake, and Lirebrevju, who led on site as Legiman Jury, ranking lady steps on, becoming vocal points of decision-making, and the other stems from the feminine leadership style of goddess Litangar, who led behind the scenes as a karemajano, literally translated as physically weak woman, by her man maroro, literally translated as physically abled man. This is what Franz Hessel describes as a shadow governor or manipulator that lead behind the scenes. The 21st century social relevance of these two concepts of leadership highlight how these feminism models are constantly renegotiated today by women in the Marshall Islands that perform political roles, characterizing Marshallese women's social relevance in governance, particularly in the realms of cultural dominance. This paper provides a brief anthropological record on how feminism and the centrality of the female define and decide political and cultural priorities of the Marshall Islands through the crucial roles of women in dictating the Marshall Islands' matrilineal Joey clan culture, which often dictate the lanterner system of cultural configuration. Goddesses in legends and in Marshallese cosmology is apparent within the oral traditions of the Marshall Islands that depict many of the cultural attributes of the nation itself. Lijab Kanira, the founder of the Arabra clan, Lijab of Natural, Lumagain, Lirebrebiju, the mother of all clans in Rada. Limtuan is the first female in the Rally cosmology. Lejaman, the first female in the Rada cosmology. Lijivaga, the great mother turtle. Luadon Mo, the mother of all clans from Namalijakwe, the beautiful of Ebon. Lumangantip, Liom, Luktanger, who invented the sail, who is the archetype of the Karamajano leadership behind the scenes style. Jinerilukobo, Lutarmelu, who introduced navigation, and Dumanaman, the pole star. So powerful are women in configuring culture that the language revolves around them, as does our genealogies, where lineage and clan membership alongside land ownership is traced through one's mother, not father. We even have a saying, we know our mothers, but we don't know our fathers, hence the matrilineal concept. Matrilineal culture is best described by the phrase "Ankaray lang kain," literally translated to mean these islands belong to women. Even when we look at the existing vocabulary and the existing astrology, Liptanger is forever immortalized in the constellation of Aruga, and Lumanaman itself is also forever immortalized in the Polaris, the guiding beacon being the North Star or the Pole Star, which is also currently in the Marshallese flag. Prior to the Japanese era, there was the German colonial period with no known visibility, highlighting the fact that the Karemajano archetype was very apparent during the German era. But it was as we approach the Japanese era, we see a lone female here, Leroy Duedo of Arna Atoll, taking the lead visibly as a Legiman Juri here in the Council of Chiefs meeting in Jelosh during the Japanese colonial period. As we move on to the Trust Territory period, the Marshall Islands Congress elected its first female first female congresswoman being Dorothy Kabua, who is significant not only because of her membership in the Marshall Islands Congress at a time when mostly it was run by men, but because she was the first indigenous Micronesian to speak in front of the United Nations Trusteeship Council in 1953. As we approach the Congress of Micronesia days in the 1960s, when it was created in 1965, the only one to be a member of the Congress of Micronesia was Miss Carmen Bigler. As we approach independence, where Marshall Islands had its own constitution and was able to wave its first flag, we see the feminine leadership archetype of Liptanger, or rather the Karemajano type, where the shadow governor or shadow manipulator is reflected through the leadership style of Miss Emmeline Kabua, who was the wife of the first president. Being the mother of the nation, she also designed the flag. And as I said before, as you guys see the star, that is Lumanaman. As we approach the second and third presidency, here we have Ms. Hiromi Kabua and Ms. Mary Note, who also led behind the scenes through their husbands, solidifying a partnership of leadership, as in was with the First Lady being Emmeline Kabua. Ms. Mary Note is also significant to note because her husband was the first commoner president, and as in all leadership styles of partnership, Marshall Islands is no different, where leading through partnership to solidify Christian values in marriage is apparent. Here we have Ms. Anona Loya, wife of President Loya, Ms. Ginger Kabua, wife of current President David Kabua, and Ms. Tomeng. And I'm sorry, I forgot to put her here, but also there is Ms. Hannah, the wife of late Iroj Lablab Jurela. As we approach the Council of Chiefs side of things, or the Council of Euros, the House of Lords, we see Lero Jatama Sedakaya creating precedent for a word which is now being readily used, even though it did not always exist in the Marshallese vocabulary, being a female paramount chieftain, which is translated to mean in the Marshallese language, Lero Laplat. Parliamentarians, even if Marshallese people have been privileged in traditions, our elected leadership is not always kind. Since 1979 up to the present contents of 2022, only 6 parliamentarians have been elected. On the top left, we have Ms. Evelyn Cano, who was the first female senator from Jeloj and the first female senator of an independent republic. Ms. Hilda Hein in the middle top is the first female president and the first female senator of Aur and the first female president of any independent Pacific nation state. On to our right is Ms. Abakan Jane Madison, the first female and only female senator of Ronglap. On the bottom right, we have Ms. Daisy Alec Momotaro, the second female senator of Jaloj, and in the middle, the only senator of Kwajalein and the first female senator of Kwajalein being Ms. Kudalang Kabua, and on the left, the first and only female senator of Udarak Atoll. Ambassadors and judges are no different, but what I like to pay reference to is that 3 of these women are the only existing female ambassadors to date. Ms. Doreen Kabua is the first female ambassador for Switzerland. Ms. Amatline Kabua is not only the first female ambassador for any ambassador post, but she's also the first female ambassador to the United Nations and the current ambassador for the United Nations. Prior to that, she was the first female ambassador to Fiji and Japan and was the first female mayor for Madra Atoll. On her bottom is Ms. Najon Edwards, who was also the first female ambassador of Taiwan. These are the only 3 ambassadors known. And on the bottom left, I like to pay reference to this photo because these are the only 2 judges, Ms. Grace Lebon on the right and Ms. Claire Loyak to the left. They are significant to note because they are judges in the traditional rights courts. And as I said before, our traditions play a role in giving privilege to women, particularly in the realms of visibility in whatever ways of leadership they choose, whether it's behind the scenes or up front visibly. My images were taken from Google, Office of the President of the Republic of the Marshall Islands, Pacifica Renaissance, Pacific Digital Library, World Bank, United Nations, Marshall Islands Courthouse, and Christian Science Monitor. Thank you very, very much for listening to my presentation.